bless everyone on this afternoon. This is another clergy conversation, and I'm grateful for this clergy conversation and who I'm interviewing. One of the great preaching pastor sons of the Greater Mount Olive Baptist Church in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, my friend and my big brother, and whom I am grateful to call friend and big brother. And he's also the proud pastor of the Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church of South Bend, Indiana, where he is doing a fantastic job. And so, would you help me welcome our guest for today, Pastor Ray Owens, big bro? Welcome.
Thank you, Pastor Brown. Thank you for letting me come and talk with you. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you as well. So let's jump in it. Just tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. I was born and raised in the Greater Mount Olive Baptist Church. That would be 2717 North Kelly Avenue. And I gave my, um, accepted my call into ministry as a 16-year-old young man under Pastor Egellin Woodbury. And he let me matriculate for 2 years until I decided to go to Oklahoma Baptist University. I'm not one of those short termers, you smart guys got y'all's degree in 4 years. I took the extended path, but graduated from Oklahoma Baptist University. My statement has always been that it was Mount Olive that gave me birth in the ministry, taught me fundamentals. Pastor Edwin Woodbury and the Greater Mount Olive Baptist Church taught me about ministry. Uh, um, because General Motors shut down in Oklahoma City, that required relocation. And so one of my running statements is it was the Mount Olive Baptist Church and Pastor Egglin Woodbury that gave me birth, but it was the Forest Hill Missionary Baptist Church and Pastor Aaron Jackson that gave me life in Fort Worth, Texas. He put my life back right, gave me focus and purpose, and really that almost 2 year plan there
Mhm.
gave me what was necessary to get me ready to start pastoring here in South Bend, Indiana. And 14 years later, the Lord has still been good to me.
Yes, sir. And I really want to have this conversation, this dialogue with you, especially when we talk about old Mount Olive, because I've always heard the legendary stories, and my mom talks about old Mount Olive 27th and 27th North Kelly. Of course, Uncle Rick talks about it. All you guys talk about 27th, the old Mount Olive. So talk to us, give us, if you will, just an experience or a history lesson. How was it growing up in Old Mount Olive off 27th and Kelly?
Well, was being respectful to Pastor Douglas and Greater Mount Olive now, I don't know how much different Mount Olive is. I think the spirit of Mount Olive is the spirit of Mount Olive. But I
Right.
will say that they invested in young people heavily,
Yes, sir.
trained and taught from junior deacon, youth Sunday. Youth Sunday wasn't just a token Sunday. You learned to do everything. We met probably every bishop, preacher you could think of,
Mm,
from E. O'Neill to E. Booker, then to even Egglin Woodbury on third Sundays, as all the bishop preachers at the time would come through Mount Olive and preach on third Sunday, Sunday morning, Sunday evening. And so the investment they put in us, they taught us church, taught us to have a reverence for God, taught us to have excellence in everything we do. And man, I'm learning how to do welcomes. They're teaching me God's trombones, and I'm doing Go Down Moses. The things that the youth department taught me that is funny because now I'm doing it as pastoring, and they're like, "Oh, pastor, you're groundbreaking. You're cutting new territory." No, I'm not. I'm copying Greater Mount Olive the way I was raised, and
mhm.
now I'm doing it with my youth here. So I'm indebted to Greater Mount Olive.
Yes, sir. And so when you talk about the Bishop College preachers, like I said, my mom told me the same thing about how those Sundays, different Bishop College preachers would come into town. So when you were growing up in Greater Mount Olive, who were just some of those voices that you heard that were impactful to you and that were inspiring to you? I know it's a
Doc,
play.
I
So,
mean, Doc, any guy you can name that came through Bishop came through Greater Mount Olive at one time or not, because at the time, Pastor Kelly Booker and at the time Pastor Timothy Neal
Right.
were bishop boys, so they would always bring their preacher friends home to be able to preach at Mount Olive. And whether they were preaching in the morning or in the evening, they were always there. And so, I mean, I saw some boys way before they got known. I mean, before jokingly, before Pastor Jerome Kirby's full curl, I'm seeing smaller versions of it. A lot of these guys that came through cut teeth at Mount Olive Baptist Church. Now
Right.
we didn't know. We just knew that these were just young preachers that were good preachers and had great horns and could holler left and right, and even then you'd be like, wow, I wish I could holler like that. I can't. That's not my gift. But wonderful people, and yeah, they all came through Mount Olive.
So you said you were called at 16 years old.
Yes, sir.
So how was that experience for you?
Pastor Woodbury walked me through it real well. In fact, what he did to me is what I do to pastors, preachers now. Um, and some of them have the same response that I first had with Pastor Woodbury, because you think it's mean. Because I went in the office and I talked to him and said, Pastor, I think I'm called to preach. And he said, you think you're called to preach? I said, yeah. He said, well, get out of my office and come back when you know. And I'm like, dude, I'm coming here for clarity and wisdom or advice, and that's kind of a very rough statement. And he just kind of looked at me again. He was just even more rough. He said, if you can run, run. If you can run, and there is no fear of reprisal, God's not waking you up in your sleep. He's not continuing to talk to you. Run as far as you can, as fast as you can. But if the Lord is consistently talking to you, calling you, there is no way to get away from him. And then I'm introduced to the famous Woodbury statement that he enters sermons and pulpits with. Lord, speak. For unless you speak, men will not hear. Lord, speak. Eyes will not be seen.
Right.
Yeah, but he introduced me to that First Samuel 3 passage
Yes, sir.
there. If you hear the Lord speaking, here's where you say, here am I. Speak to me, Lord. And that's literally what I did. I accepted my call at 16. If I remember right, I think I preached a youth Sunday night, in March of '86. And yeah, been with the Lord ever since in that
So what
regard.
was the first sermon? Do you remember the first sermon?
Matthew chapter 7, verse 24 through 27, building on solid foundation. Absolutely horrible sermon. Absolutely horrible sermon. No, you don't forget your first one,
No.
because I missed the mark heavily on that with what we know now. But yeah, Matthew chapter 7, 24 through 27. And what amazes me about it was, for a guy who had always been up and in front of people, that was the first time the people in the crowd kind of rattled me, uh,
Mm.
which is a good thing, because you have to learn to see God and not see people.
Yes, sir. And so when you're 16 years old and you're called to preach, as you said, Pastor Woodbury walked you through it. What would you say to a younger preacher now? What would you say to somebody who says, I've been called to preach now? When you say that like what lessons that you learn would you incorporate to somebody now?
Okay, well, I mean, when people come now and talk to me and say, I think I've been called to preach. One, I commit to praying with them through this process to make sure that the Lord is calling you specifically to preach, because the Lord could be calling you to do something else. In my case, I tried, and explained this ultimately to Pastor Woodbury, I tried everything else to get God to leave me alone. So I got closer in this. I was more committed to this. I did more to that. That never made the call go away. It wasn't until I accepted full and total surrender. And so, with anybody who thinks they have to be, or they think that a call is on their life, I first of all try to get them to, okay, let's acknowledge the call. Let's acknowledge that the
Mhm.
Lord is speaking to you. Okay. And then as we get clarity about what he's saying, and once we know what he's saying, it's not just enough to acknowledge it, but then you have to accept the call. Because I think
Right.
there's a lot of people who know they're called, And some of them Jonah boys who are brave enough to tell you I'm called, but I ain't doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Well, I don't want to be near you because God gonna get the whole boat and storm, and I don't want to be nowhere near that. So it's not just acknowledging that I'm called, but it's also accepting that I'm called. And then you've got the final step, which is a big step. After I accept it and I acknowledge it, I've got to announce it. I've got to step out that moment of separation to where I am saying that I belong to God and God only. And that announcing is that literally I'm drawing the line in the sand at that point. Things are going to
Mhm.
change from that
Right.
point on. And so that's kind of that three-step process I walk ministers through to make sure that you can answer that all
Mhm.
the way through. What I won't do and why I'm grateful now of what Pastor Woodbury did to me is the worst thing we can do is rob someone of the certainty and the surety of their call.
Mm.
Because when you know that God called you, when you know that He placed you, storms can come and troubles can rise. But if I know that God called me, He will keep me through it. And there have been times, Doc, all I've had is my call. I ain't had
Right.
people, I ain't had money or finances, but I had my call, and
Yes.
my call kept me.
Yes, sir. And from what I've heard back in the older days, somebody was as I was listening to an interview Ralph West did with H.B. Charles, and he made mention of the fact, like back in those days, you say you accept the call, next Sunday you preaching. But I think it's also important, as you said, how you walked through it instead of rushing to it, because I can remember when I first acknowledged my call and accepted it. I told Pastor Wallace I'm at Pilgrim Rest in Dallas. It was in August, but I didn't preach till November. But what he did to me, I went to his office, we prayed. He gave me some books to read, but he slowly got me ready. Whether it was just sitting in the pulpit, sitting on the far side, whether it was doing an altar prayer, whether it was just getting me ready. So then, when it was time to preach, which was still nerve wracking, I can understand it was the worst sermon in the history of preaching, but it was those processes. And I think you said something very important about how a three-step process instead of somebody just saying, "Okay, I'm just ready to preach and get out in the crowd," because it's different when you sit in the audience than when you got to stand in front of the audience. That's two totally different type of feelings.
Yeah, well, there's a whole nother step, at least for me, that now that you've announced and you're beginning that separation process, then now we need to prepare.
Right.
And everybody wants, now I'm gonna get up and preach. No, you need to prepare yourself as a minister, and before you're preparing a manuscript, you're not ready for the manuscript until you prepared yourself,
Mm.
because you are going to be the walking and living manuscript. So there's a preparation that goes with this entire process, and so I work with people as they go through that process. One of the unique things I thank God for now is that God didn't make me as some of my fellow pastors and friends. I wasn't what I refer to as a first round draft pick. I was not one of the guys that I'm called in February and I'm pastoring by November. That wasn't my experience. I wasn't blessed with full cut grown teeth from the
Right.
very beginning. I had to work every step of the process. I had to learn, grow in the craft, still learning and growing in the craft. And that's been the blessing for me because then I can tell somebody something that I've actually done. And it's not always easy. It sometimes can be frustrating, especially when it looks like, wow, everybody else is kind of moving and advancing, but you got to go at God's space and God's timing.
And I remember, because I can tell you this now. I used to always follow your blog that you would do, because I used to always read it all the time. And I remember one time, and specifically, you had talked about how Pastor Tony Roan had taken you guys and was just talking to you and doing some teaching, but also how even you were lamenting that in that blog about how, in a sense, it seemed like, you know Uncle Rick and Pastor Mitchell, their generation came and they became pastor, and then the rest of you guys were kind of just waiting, kind of just as it was, if you felt like stuck. But you just said something, waiting on God's timing. But what would you tell a pastor or a preacher who wants to pastor, who has that desire, who has that thirst, but it seems like, as you just said, they're still in the waiting pattern. Everybody else is getting called, but there's and social media doesn't help. So everybody else is getting called. But what would you tell that preacher? And even if it's a pastor who may not be at the biggest church, but what would you tell those servants of God about waiting and just trusting God?
One of the things I would tell them, I was just talking to Pastor Witherspoon. We were just trying to get Sunday school lesson together for Sunday. We're in the Union Gospel Press Sunday School, and so we're on Sons of Korah, number 16. And one of the best things that you can do, and what I would tell preachers, the best place for you to be is where God has placed you. The worst thing you can do is to ever get out of the place God placed you. And one of the biggest moments of rebellion, frustration, resentment is when we try to buck the destiny God has put on our life because it ain't happening fast enough. Or it's not, I see this over here and I like this. No, the best place you can be is where the Lord has placed you. There might be a reason why God placed you there. You think you're ready for this, but you're not. You think I've got the preaching skills and the homiletical skills to be able to be a pastor over here. And you might, but does your personal life be able to match that assignment? Can you handle the challenges that you don't know anything about over there? So no, bloom where you're planted. That's what Charles Stanley said. Bloom where you are. If you bloom where you are, then when it's time, the Lord will elevate you. And I'm not going to be dishonest about it. You see a lot of pastors who seem to be blessed to move from church to church to church to church to church, and you are in a place to where God is giving you a blessing, but you won't look at it as a blessing. I've been able to pastor 14 years in a place they said I wouldn't last two. I didn't know anybody in South Bend, Indiana. I don't have no family. I ain't got nobody here. I know nobody. When I got here, I had two phone calls. Andre A. McGee, who said, "Welcome to the town. We'll talk." Pastor Keith Witherspoon, who was calling me while he was going on a hospital visit and said, "Doc, I know where you come from and I know you. We got plenty of time to talk. Welcome to the town." That's all I knew. But I had the Lord. It is sometimes dangerous to look at somebody else's assignment and then wish I had that. But no, you have to bloom where the Lord has planted you. So I would tell that person, if you are where the Lord has placed you, be content where the Lord has placed you, because bitterness and resentment has messed up many ministries.
Mm. Wow, that's heavy right there. And you go to Oklahoma Baptist. So how was that experience? And talk to us about the importance of education in preaching and pastoring and just in ministry.
Um, it's funny because I think Doc would be so proud of all of us. I went to school because he made us. I mean, there was no choice. You were going to school. I wanted to be a bishop boy. Don't fool yourself. I wanted to be a bishop boy. I thought I am coming out of high school in '88, and I'm going to be the next round of the great bishop boys. But Bishop closed down when I graduated in '88, which sent me on a detour to go to Oklahoma Baptist University. No, it's not our preaching style or culture, but as it relates to giving you the tools that you need to be able to work, they have been a blessing. My bachelor's is from there, my master's is from there. I probably would be working on a doctorate there if they had that set up, but now I'm at Anderson University in Anderson, South Carolina, working on my PhD right now. All that love for education came from Egellin Woodbury. He had books they don't even print anymore. He had a thirst for knowledge, and he passed that on. One of the best things he did, we had preacher class on Sunday evenings to where he walked us through the steps of preparing a sermon, delivering a sermon, studying interpretation. Long before I ever stepped on college, I was learning all of those things in the new members classroom at the new building, 1020 Northeast 42nd. But I learned that under Pastor Woodbury.
And so talk to us, because we all love Pastor Egglin Woodbury's he's deeply and sorely missed. But from having had that experience of just being a son of his in the ministry, um, how was that? Just as you go through ministry, as you learn from him, as you watched him, as you studied and observed, just how was it being one of his sons in the ministry? And help us with the importance of having that father figure in the ministry to really guide you along.
It was helpful. It was necessary. It wasn't always easy because each person had their own relationship with him, and he treated us according to our gifts. So there were many times I was frustrated because, um, I didn't get the chance to go out and do a lot of youth days and all those things because my responsibilities were at the church. Now I'm grateful now because he kept me close because was, I all of us have different experiences. Pastor Turner, he was a father figure in a lot of ways to Pastor Turner, and I watched how he kind of what I would say raised that generation of preachers. His generosity wasn't just the preachers there because there's a lot of guys who weren't directly sons of Woodbury, sons of the house, but they looked at him also as a father figure. I mean, there's guys all around that from Mitchell to Pastor Gaddis to all those guys who looked up mightily to Pastor Woodbury. And then this kind of newer generation came along that was trying to learn. Um, Probably guys like me that were probably asking too much and talking too much when we should have been listening and paying attention more. Um, but thankfully, he was um, patient with us, firm with us. I mean, I know, he's in a better seat now, but there are times I wish he could see firsthand, we could be honoring him. I mean, my church knows Egellin, Woodbury left and right. So I talk about him all the time, but I wish they could really know and he could see my education. He helped get. I'm going to walk next year with my PhD. That started back in the classroom at Mount Olive. It's not about the degree. It's just about continuing to seek learning to give yourself better tools so that you can be better in your presentation and that you're giving God a more sharper tool.
And so when you say that, I think you also said something important as well, that while we have those senior pastors, while we have those pastors who are instrumental, who are so important, that we do our best to honor them while we can. Because I think sometimes we honor, but sometimes we wish we could do more and we could do more. And then the Lord calls them. And then it's like, I wish that God would just give us one day just to bring them back down, just one day to where we could do, where we can honor them. So when you talk about that, I think that's important as well, is that we honor those who have meant so much to us, that we honor those who have been impactful, and especially when we're talking about Egellin Woodbury, legendary figure, legendary pastor, and you were part of that regime, if you will, that was there when it went from 27th, then it explodes at 27, and then where it is right now. But as you say, you learn. So what were things that you took from your learning experience that were, as you, I know we've hit some, but what were those other things that you could say, just y'all's relationship, where you could say, I didn't like it then, but I like it now, or just those things that you've never forgotten just by your one-on-one time with him?
I watched him grow a church through Bible study. I watched him grow a
Mm-hmm.
church through hands-on teaching the Word of God. He did that through not just Sunday morning preaching,
Mm-hmm.
but really he did that through Sunday school. He did that through Wednesday night Bible study. He did that through creating classes that at the time we didn't have. He started the young adult ministry that had three folk. That blows up literally consistently because he took the time to be able to build it, to be able to work with it, and he built Bible study. Because of that, I have a love for teaching. In fact, a lot of guys love the preaching moment, and I know I don't want to say I don't because I do, but I have just as much of a love for teaching as I do preaching. And the older I'm getting, preaching is the fun part, but the creativity and learning how to shape things, I get just excited about teachers meeting as I do Sunday morning. I mean, I just do,
Yes, sir.
because you're having the opportunity to be able to share. I learned that from Pastor Egellin Woodbury. Some of my associates would probably say that some of the things I probably wish Doc hadn't done to me, yeah, I might be doing, because I understand the need for the Lord just blessed you with a really good sermon. The Lord just let you just live mightily on Sunday. Uh, Doc would shut you down. You wouldn't be up for a minute. Uh, you could flunk. That was what frustrated. You could flunk as an associate minister. You could flunk, and he put you up next Sunday, and you could flunk, and he put you up next Sunday. It's like this guy is dying, and you keep putting him up, and I just lived. Let me up, man. You might not get us another 9 months. Because he was trying to. He was very careful, specifically with me. He was very careful of trying to teach me something I didn't understand.
Mhm.
All them amens ain't really amens.
Right.
A lot of them are protest amens. Them folk mad at the pastor for this, that, and the other. They shouting you, but you don't know what that really is. And you don't need to get caught up in the people giving you false narratives. You need to
Right.
stay true to the word of God. And so he was very careful and very hands-on in the development. And that part of Egglin Woodbury lives.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
at 1862 North Olive Street, South Bend, Indiana. That lives tremendously, because I want you to be able that one day when I'm gone, that you can stand on your own.
Right. Yes, sir. And so, how also was it going from associate to assistant pastor? How was that transition for you?
That transition wasn't a transition, because
Mhm.
it was still, you just do what Pastor Woodbury tells you to do. That didn't change
Right.
at all. What changed was, it's a kind of fateful night in 2002 when Pastor Woodbury um, suffers his heart attack.
Mhm.
Um, Leaving him at the hospital, he's fine. He's leaving. He's going home. I leave to find out later the blood work came back, and you have this kind of progression of health concerns that put me in places that I wouldn't have been. Him trusting me to do what I was supposed to do, to see life differently. It's different preaching once every whatever versus being up every week. Still trying to remember, this is not your church. This has nothing to do with you. This is another man's wood that he's chopped. Your job is to make sure the fire don't go out.
Right.
Uh, and so it was different than pastoring, because pastoring, I'm bringing the wood, I'm chopping the wood, and all that. Here, I wasn't. All I'm doing is making sure that the wood that's there doesn't go out. But it was difficult, because certainly you didn't want to embarrass God. You didn't want to embarrass Pastor Woodbury. I never wanted to do that. And then, I mean, shoot, they were. We're not making the numbers up. Doc was preaching to 1,500 people, 1,000 at the morning service. He's 15 plus in the 11 o'clock service, legit. And I mean,
Right.
Mount Olive, you had to know the word, because he had taught them word. You couldn't get up there just talking anything.
Right.
So while yes, they are known for being a supportive church that supports the preacher, they support preachers who are preaching.
Right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so, and I think that's also important as well. Is that I think, as you say, understanding that, as you say, I'm here to keep the fire going, not start my own fire. And I think, and so help us with that, because sometimes, a preacher may get in that situation where they have to step in for a period, and then it seems like they're here, as you say, they're hitting that air mains, they're hearing the applause, and then and we know that sometimes people in the audience can mess with our minds if we're not careful. So as you say, you're not making your own fire, you're just sustaining this fire. So when you, even in your sermon preparation, in those moments, you know, I know you had to seek God. I know you, and there may be some stuff you really wanted to say, but you couldn't say because you were not the under shepherd of that flock.
Thankfully, because of training, I
Mm-hmm.
never had those moments because
Mm-hmm.
you began to learn as he taught. There's a difference between expository preaching, evangelical preaching, and pastoral preaching. Yes, when I stepped into that role,
Right.
I started developing eyesight I never had because I was in a seat I had never sat in. But thankfully, because I was talking to Pop at that time, I I was never brave enough to be able to step out on that front because I was just growing into that. You have to make sure in your preaching, and that goes back again to, yeah, the Lord can bless you with a good sermon. You could have had a great Sunday, and there can be a whole lot of people who, "Ooh, I love you," and people always do that. Oh, you should be preaching more. I don't know why he doesn't put this person up more, whatever. You got to be very careful. And thankfully, Doc was more in my ear than people. That when people did try all of those things, I began to learn that ain't really what you think it is. Now, again, one of the harder things that was for me, but was the blessing. When Doc was sick, I'm up preaching. When Doc came back, he came back and he took back over the preaching roles. And so I don't think I got up again for maybe a year and a half. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when you've been up that you know you can feel some sort of way. What I didn't know was he started placing me other places. He started making me teach noonday Bible study. He started making me learn how to plan a budget. He started walking me through the backside of the church. The Lord has now, through sickness, taught you the front of the church. Let me teach you the back of the church because you need to learn it all. This is how you do a hospital visit. This is how you minister to sick and shut in. This is what it looks like to be able to prepare, present budgets. So that by the time I became a pastor, I wasn't the average first year pastor. He had taught me all of these things. I didn't realize that at the time, but he had taught me every side of the church.
That's that's impeccable right there. It's just that you were taught all of these things, and so you take all these experiences, and then you say, and then big bro, you say you had to relocate to Texas, to Fort Worth, Texas, because of GM. I do remember that, and then you land at Forest Hill Missionary Baptist Church under the late Reverend Dr. A. Jackson Jr. So talk to us for and about that experience, about, because you said Mount Olive gave you birth, but now here comes Forest Hill, they gave you life. So just talk to us about that those moments with Dr. Jackson and Forest Hill, and how you.
Uh, Jackson was life.
Yes.
At that moment when I was leaving, to be honest, it was EJ Tyson. I'm because of some personal things I was going through at the time, because of some training of Southern Baptists. Um, I'm ready to walk away from everything.
Mm,
Um, Not because of biblical training, but because of Southern Baptist tradition. It's EJ Tyson who says, "Now, if the Lord called you, why can't He keep you?
mm,
If you preach about grace and forgiveness, why can't the Lord extend it to you?" I go down to Jackson and I'm wounded at the time. I'm wounded, and it is a culture shock at the time to go from seeing 1,500 a service to where when you're going to Forest Hill at the time, I think I'm looking at 50 people, good, strong, loving people, but it's a dramatic difference. And Jackson is an older minister who needs help and wants help, but who the person who needed help was me,
mm-hmm,
uh, who needed to teach me that God still had a plan for my life and still had purpose for my life. And He was using me left and right, and I didn't want to be used. I didn't want to do anything. Jackson's pushing me to teach Bible studies. I don't want to do nothing. I just want to go to work in Arlington and be a hermit here in Fort Worth and whatever. No, I'm surrounded by great churches and there are great churches and great preachers all throughout Fort Worth. But I didn't want to be a part of that. And piece by piece, Jackson healed me. Now, here's the ironic part. God needed me to go through this because where he's going to send me to is a wounded church.
Mm.
Well, seminary can't teach you how to pastor a wounded church because there ain't no classes they teach about wounded churches. In
Wow.
seminary, they teach you pastoring in a vacuum and
Yep.
everything perfect. They don't teach you those life situations. When I get to Macedonia, Macedonia is a wounded church because one, the pastor that they had was a home product, had left them to go someplace else. And rather than heal from that, they immediately got somebody else who sounded like the last one, and he stayed 6 months because I think he kind of figured out after a while, y'all don't want me, y'all haven't healed. And they had gone through about 2 or 3 years. The ironic thing is that at the time I originally had put in for Macedonia, me and that guy who got it were the final candidates. I was the guy they wanted, but they went another way. By the time they called for me, I'm in Fort Worth. I'm wounded. I don't put in no application. They're like,
Mm.
Doc, we don't want to go back through the process. We want to see if you want to come up here. No, I don't want to come up here. I don't want to do nothing. Y'all don't want me. Go get somebody else. Well, will you let us decide that? No. Y'all go get somebody else. I'm wounded. I'm hurt. I'm divorced. Y'all don't want no divorce pastor. Go on and get whatever. Uh, will you just let us decide that? Okay, fine. Went up there, preached 2 Sundays in snow, taught 2 Sundays in snow. Somebody sat there and said, do you mind if we do some research at your old church? Do you mind if we talk to your ex-wife? Do you do all that? Sure, go do all that. And I said, thank you, God, because that'll be the end of it. No, they called everybody, everybody talked with. I'm trying to get out of this. And it was Aaron Jackson who kept saying, God put you here to heal so that in your pastoring, you can go heal them. You just go be faithful. They not gonna like you the same way you didn't like me, and the same way you didn't like where you are. Be faithful. And man, shoot, uh, Macedonia, I don't think, thank God there's a lady by the name of Dolores Weatherspoon. She's my best friend. I came with all of my uh, seminary tricks. I'm going to meet with every member of the church. First 100 days, I'm going to meet. I'm going to have individual meetings. I'm going to meet with everybody. Yeah, all the seminary stuff. Dolores Weatherspoon brought me, and I brought her in the office, and she said, you might be the best pastor in the world. I ain't going to even like you till you've been here 5 years.
Mm.
I ain't even going to give you a chance. And everybody feels the exact same way I feel. That lady was the best to this day. I tell her, God brought her into my office to save me so my feelings did not get hurt and remind me the same way you were wounded and you need to heal. Now you need to help Macedonia through the healing process. So when I say Aaron Jackson and Forest Hill gave me life, I wouldn't be pastoring for 14 years if I hadn't learned those lessons in Fort Worth, wounded, so that I can help minister to a wounded church.
My. I hope. Wow. Wow. You had to go through the wounds so that you could lead a wounded church.
How am I going to talk about it? I don't know nothing about it.
I mean, that's
We love books. I ain't got no book on that. Yeah, I got Wounded Healer. Yeah, I got that stuff. But I'm talking about if the church is wounded, if the church is wounded because they don't trust pastors, because pastors always come and go, if they don't trust it, and you're coming following, they're looking at you like you're just one of the next ones. The church was wounded, and I had to let the church heal.
and so wow. Oh my goodness. That be real. I don't that right there is just a word that I hope we all are. That's a word like none other because and it's crazy that you say that because I like I said once again I follow your blog and I remember you talking and have the reverence you had for Dr. Jackson, but now I see why, as you say, because with you, you've already said I'm wounded, I'm hurt, I'm broken, I don't want to do anything, but as you say, piece by piece by piece, he keeps just telling you do this, and as you say, you are forever indebted to him. But I think that's something else. The importance of God sending us those people when we need them at the right time.
Agreed. I would have imploded off of tradition, wrong, some very wrong biblical interpretation too. But I would have walked away from a call that God had on my life, and it was strategic. God sent EJ Tyson to save me from me as I'm going down to Texas for an older pastor who is in need of help. But the truth is, I needed him much more than he needed me. I didn't do a thing. He did everything for me. He put me back together and gave me back purpose. And so while I take away nothing for the training and the birth that Greater Mount Olive gave me, Forrest Hill and Dr. Jackson gave me life.
And so, and so help us with that. As preachers, sometimes, we prepare, we pray, we exegete, we're ready to preach, we're ready to hoop and holler. But you said something that I think sometimes we as preachers sometimes have a hard time admitting when we're the ones that need help, because we're always giving and you know trying to give help, but sometimes we're the ones that need the help the most. Sometimes we're the ones who are distraught, sometimes we're the ones who are discouraged, we're the ones that are down. And so, but you said something, it's important to, in a sense, recognize when you need help.
Yeah, I mean, there are levels to that. I mean, certainly I've had to go through that process even in pastoring. As you're continuing to minister to people and you are in a season where all you're doing is pouring out and you need to have someone pouring into you, you need to have some Jethros around you to be able to tell you this isn't good for you. What you're doing is going to really kill yourself. So you need that. But by the same token, if you don't have someone to be able that you can trust and give you godly counsel, as you're going through these things. What I tried to do in Fort Worth, thankfully, God didn't let it happen with Pastor Jackson. You are not healing by just holding up in a room and shutting a door and not talking. That's not healing. Not to process is not healing. You have to process what you are going through. You have to work that thing out. And I wasn't doing that. Because of what he did that gave me the process. Now, ironically, here I am, many years later in a PhD program where I'm working on the psychological safety of the church to where do we make it safe for members to admit their mistakes? Do we
Mm,
make it safe for members to be their whole selves? Do we shame them when they're trying to admit I have problems? And then by shaming them, teach them never to tell the church anymore
right.
about their problems. And they look at the church as a place where I received abuse when I should have received grace. And so it's ironic the arc that God has taken me because now what I think He is preparing me to write and to defend and then to I think implement here. I had to live it myself.
Wow, that's a blessing. It's just a testimony of God's goodness, and just for you, be bro, being that encouragement that you, even though you didn't want to. I mean, you could teach a whole class on you still staying faithful, you still staying with it, and being able to receive what you need in order to grow. And so now you get to Macedonia, but it's the first time they tell you no.
Yeah,
And
listen, it was hold on. Here's the funny part. The guy who came in is now the guy who's pastoring in Dallas. He just pastored Pastor Williams, Carlos Williams. Carlos Williams, who just got Pills and
really,
Rose. Yeah, me and Carlos are boys. Me and Carlos are the last two for Macedonia.
wow,
And they went with Carlos. That's a great choice. I got a problem with it. Again, I think because of some things I think he saw and because of fit for family, he went on back to Alabama and then went to Flint and then Chattanooga and now down to
wow,
Dallas, Texas. So when they called me, they don't want to restart the process. They just want to be like, will you just come? No, y'all might as well restart the process. We don't want to. We just rather you come or whatever. Man, this is so funny. They sent a pulpit search committee down to Forest Hill in Fort Worth, Texas. The second worst sermon I preached, worst sermon I preached was my first sermon. The second worst sermon I ever preached was in Forest Hill when the pulpit search committee came. I don't want you there. And the church folk know who are these strangers from South Bend. Oh, y'all think y'all taking our young preacher? No, you not. So they wasn't helping me. I didn't want them to be helped. It was just horrible off in there. Preached the worst sermon ever in my life, second worst sermon. And God kept opening doors, everything I was doing. Then I'm like, well, okay, General Motors ain't gonna let me go. And I gotta have something. At the same time, this church is saying we need you. General Motors offered me a check to say go away. They bought me out. We're gonna give you the years. You can go retire out with 20. We're gonna give you a check right now to go away. And I'm like, wow, God, there's no way around this. Go to the wounded church that don't want you
Wow.
there, that I don't want to go to.
And you told them no.
I told them no. I didn't turn in an application. Look, Doc, if you told me no, you don't want me. So
Right.
if you don't want me, cool. I don't want to. I don't want to go. But the Lord kept intervening in the thing. Every
Wow.
time I'm literally trying to mess it up, God said,
It's like that reminds me of watching a 30 for 30 because Isaiah Thomas was saying he didn't want to go to the Pistons. He said he would every team he interviewed he would purposely try to mess it up, but then finally the Pistons owner at the time, Jack McCloskey, said it don't matter what you say. If you're there at number two, we're picking you. Then lo and behold, he has a Hall of Fame career with the
yeah,
Pistons. And so lo and behold, here you are. You said I don't want to go. I've done everything I can. I even preached a horrible sermon that they flying people. And then lo and behold, you come to Macedonia. So when you finally yielded to God, how was it basically going from OKC and Forward, I always call them the sister states. For OKC, Oklahoma and Texas, I call them the sister states because we do everything together. But now you talking about a complete culture shock. You're going somewhere where you, as you say, you by yourself, no friends, no family. You're literally at in a sense, I don't want to say ground zero, but it's kind of like ground zero for your own personal self because you're the new person in town. So how was that experience going from OKC in Texas to now you're in Indiana, in South Bend
um,
with
the
no
unique thing is here's how it felt, and it still feels this way at times. Go study Daniel, and when you go study Daniel, Daniel has lived in a place to where he's 90 years old, and the people still refer to him as that guy that came from them. He's got more time in his life living in that area than he
family.
does where he came from. And he's still identified where he came from. I'm still to this day introduced as the Oklahoma preacher who stole one of our South Bend churches, and yada, yada. That happens. Um, One of the blessings I had, the culture shock was I didn't appreciate that Oklahoma City is actually a church town.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm going to a place in South Bend that is not a church town, and nothing like what I came from. Now, Gary, Indiana, is like Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Is like Fort Worth, Texas, and the simultaneous revivals and all that. South Bend is not. So I had to find fellowship from other guys who are also not born and raised in South Bend, but are serving in South Bend to let me know that my experience is not it's not I'm not just the one going through it. We're all kind of going through it. And in that process, you're just kind of growing. It was hard. I think the only thing that kind of kept me was when I came with a 7-year-old girl, 5-year-old girl, and a 3-year-old girl. So I had sympathy that here's a dad with his 3 girls by himself. Um, Raven, after every service on Sunday morning, would come down front, grab my leg, turn around, and look at people. Wouldn't talk, wouldn't do nothing. My girls kind of kept me grounded to give me that sense of family as I was trying to grow. Pastor Witherspoon became my family. I borrowed his grandmother and grandfather, and my first Thanksgivings away, they were at his house. Uh, my life, if it wasn't for Doc, I probably would have gone crazy. He'll say the same thing. We help each other, but forget that. He's helped me. I ain't done nothing for him. He's helped me, and so I'm grateful for the people God placed that gave me a way to plant until I could stand on my own.
Right.
So when it's time for the girls to go back, because now you need your mother, because I'm a great dad, but what I can't be is a mama.
Right.
So you're with your. I'm alone. I'm still not married at the time, and everything kind of worked out. I mean, I wouldn't be married right now if it wasn't for Keith Witherspoon.
That's right. I remember. I've heard the story.
Being a wimp. I want you to know I called him a wimp. Being a wimp because his wife sets up a blind date. You should have told your wife no. He didn't. So he does what's normal for us on Sundays. He comes and grabs me on a Sunday evening after church. We get ready to go run and do something. He lies and says, "Oh, I need to go back by the my house. I left my church keys." When I get there, hey doc, I'm sorry. Wife set up a blind date. I love her more than I love you. Plus, I'm scared of her. Shut up and act right, and then shut the door. I'm like, dude, who does this? And now
Spoon.
I have spoon.
And I know that's who does that. That's who does that. Spoon. And I know he probably watching. Let me just say, there's not a friend like Keith Witherspoon. Let me put that. There's not a person like him because he even to this day we talk every week. He always is encouraging. Now he will if he gotta get into you, he's going to get into you, and he has no problem doing that.
Now believe me, he does me the same way because we're brothers. God has fixed it to where, especially here in South Bend, we've never been in the same mood at the same time. Because if we were ever in the same mood at the same time, we'd destroy this town. God has fixed it to where if he's high, I'm low. If he's low, I'm high. We balance each other out, and he has been an indeed blessing. But no, I wouldn't be. God used him as the instrument to introduce me to the wife that I have now, and has blessed me.
Amen. Praise God for that. So when you first get to Macedonia, and you say it's a wounded church, how were those first few years at Macedonia when you're preaching, teaching, as you say, you're at a wounded church, and you've heard you probably won't last 2 years, and then the history about pastors come and go. So how was that experience for you when you first get to Macedonia?
No matter what happened, it was downplayed because, one, some of that is you're just a shiny penny. And so everyone kind of gravitates to the shiny penny. And so I was the new shiny toy for a while. That was there. Two, you got to remember a lot of folk who weren't coming for the right reasons because I wasn't married. So, I mean, here's this preacher who's coming in preaching and he ain't married. Um, and he looked helpless because he got these three girls. Oh, he needs some help. No, I don't need a mama. They got a mama, but that's the way it looks. Here's his preacher. He got these three girls. Oh, he can put a couple sentences together. And then, unfortunately, because I still had my affiliations in Oklahoma City, boy, it was war every time I came back. I think I preached the 100th church anniversary at Mount Olive. Man, my deacons and stuff came with me. Now, mind you, yeah, I get it, but no, you coming right back here. That's when kind of that ownership thing that had nothing to do with me. That had to do with we're still wounded over what's happened in past pastors, and we're not ready to even trust God as of yet. So, the rumor was always out. I'm leaving. Don't get used to him because he gonna be gone. I think I've dealt with that. I think now no one says it, but I think the first 8, 9 years, that was a comment all the time that he's gone, he's leaving, he's doing this or whatever. And, you're just trying to just be faithful. But it was hard, especially in a town that if you're not born here and raised here, a lot of times, even though God is giving us position and weight and authority in places, uh, people didn't want to receive us because, oh, he don't know really what's going on because he ain't from here.
So helps you can help somebody with this just about pastoring and being single. You know, if you don't mind, but if you don't if you don't have to, but just helping somebody pastoring and being single because and sometimes as we know there are sometimes where a pulpit committee from a church may in a sense reject somebody because they're not married and not giving them a fair shot. So what advice would you give on that topic?
Um, you know, there are people who have different views on that, and I certainly understand that. I do believe that whoever's called to be a pastor should be a one woman man. That's the text, and the text as a one woman man is that nothing. When you go through that whole list of requirements, nothing should have you less dedicated to God, and none of these things can be in the way. So if you got woman issues, if you got alcohol issues and money issues and all that, you're not fit to pastor.
Mhm.
And so my argument had always been, look, I know a lot of guys who are married and not one women men. You got to make sure you're dedicated to God. But it's up to the past, it's up to the church to decide what they want. Macedonia took a chance that many churches don't take on a young 37-year-old single uh, pastor that they called in. They didn't have to take that chance. And fortunately for me, with a lot of good, protective mothers watching over me, and in my case, girls that were really my covering, I had a shield to protect me from a lot of the things that a lot of guys can get in trouble with. I wouldn't recommend uh, single pastoring because it is a very hard thing to do. Yet, with that being said, if you are committed to God and are aware of your boundaries and have set boundaries, then you can survive. And I'm proof you can survive as a single pastor, but I'm grateful every day. I have someone now who prays with me, covers me, does a lot of things that I cannot do, has taken a lot off my plate that makes my life a whole lot easier. And now, when I go back and look over married pastoring versus single pastoring, I don't know, nothing but the grace of God. I don't know how I did it. Now, when I look at all the things my wife does and handles for me and things I couldn't do, ministries I couldn't do as a single pastor that now I'm doing as a married pastor. I mean, I cheated. I had my deaconess um, I had two older deaconess, Sister Turner, who's gone on to be with the Lord, and Sister Cleasta Kilgore. Sister Cleasta Kilgore is the aunt of Pastor Ricky Harvey, Rochester, New York.
Yeah.
And they were my covering. I didn't walk into hospitals or home visits, or I didn't go nowhere without them two being right by my side. If you saw me, you saw them.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, that's good right there. So, talk to us about just preaching. When you first get to Macedonia, seeking God, talking to God about what to preach, because, and also when you first get to a church, what to preach, what to teach, because we sometimes we can be ambitious and we like, man, I want to do this series, I want to do that series, but what were keys in those first years in preaching and teaching in order for the church to, as we say, help get through those wounded spirits.
You have to learn the identity and the culture of your church. God will give that to you over time. He'll give you a burden as a pastor. That's the major difference, or one of the major differences between being an associate minister and you're just trying to get up and preach. Your sermons start to come together. You're building from one Sunday to another as a pastor. Here at Macedonia, God blessed me to start here with the identity of Macedonia in the Bible, not how we started out. No, not how we started out. The place that started out. Can you come over and help us? That's what you started out as. Go to the end. Macedonia becomes the place to where no, it's not the biggest, it's not whatever, but there are people who've dedicated themselves first to God and then their leaders, and because of that, they could do things because God gave them power to be able to do it. That's kind of where we birthed that we are Macedonia. God called us to help somebody. I know we started out as the place that needed help, but when you catch us at the end, we're the place known for giving help. So we developed a biblical identity and then taught that in the church. And that kind of was our beginning basis. of identity. A lot of people are never become what they should in Christ because they don't know who they are. That's how we birthed beginning sermons to get in. And then, as you're beginning to see needs, God just bursts and shows you what your church needs.
Right. Yes, sir. So what is your sermon process?
Um, what do you mean by that? That's a loaded question.
Okay. So when I say your sermon process, how do you go from text to proclamation, preparation and proclamation? What is your step by step process throughout the week in building your sermon?
Well, I mean, truthfully, on Monday, I'm not doing anything but rewriting and reviewing what I just did.
Okay.
I mean, Monday is a review day, a lot of frustration day because I think of all the stuff I should have said. Really, Sunday, after I get out the pulpit, let me go to the office because I'm about to start rewriting now. And there's where I miss Oklahoma City because I wish I had me a hot box Sunday night church. I want to find some place to go preach one more time. I can just say it better. The Sunday night, Monday is kind of a review of what I've just done. If I'm in a series, it's continuing building where we are, or it's starting on Tuesday. Now I'm gathering my information on both sides. I'm getting ready for teachers meeting on Wednesday. I'm getting ready for noonday Bible study and evening Bible study, as I'm also preparing my information. So Tuesday is kind of finishing the Bible studies for Tuesday and Wednesday, and it's just a gathering day. It's a gathering soaking day. Gather the information. Let's just soak. Let's just read text or whatever. Wednesday, I'm teaching Bible studies or whatever. Thursday is more of an organization day. I'm now trying to take all the information that I have. For me, I need to pare down because I gather too much. Everything you gather, you got to figure out what's for them and what's for you, because
Okay.
everything you find ain't meant for the people. Some of it's meant for you. Uh, so it's more organization. Friday is writing, crafting, creating. I should have the construction of the sermon. If nothing more than the shell, I like to be done by Fridays. Pastor and teaches you can't always do that. So Saturday is kind of a marinating day. Egellin Woodbury's words, which were a big problem I have, leave room for the spirit. You're so busy being prepared, God ain't got no room off in your sermon. And so Saturday now is more of a day of prayer. Uh, Let God kind of soak in me, so that I'll learn what I need to learn. Make sure this text is in me. I still cheat. I want to be clear. I bring my manuscript to the pulpit. I don't really use it anymore. It's really more of a comfort.
Okay.
Um, but I still have it. Yes, yeah, I got stuff on the iPad or whatever. Look, I've seen too many oopses. In my case, my iPad barely is charged at any given time. So it's if I wrote it, it should be in me. But here's my manuscript. Here's my things that I may have laid out on the iPad, and I'm ready to go on Sunday in that Holy God.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm a manuscript preacher. I love to have a manuscript, but I'm starting to see, as you say, as Pastor Woodbury said, leave room for the spirit. Because at the church Sunday, I went to go hear Uncle Rick at New Union, and he even mentioned, and he did a terrific job. But even he was like, a lesson for young preachers. You don't have to say it all because he's like, the Lord just started speaking, and what he had written, he didn't even use. So just a couple other things, bro, that we're gonna be done. Talk to us about, when we talk about reading, we talk about education, but we talk about reading and building a preacher's library. How are ways that you go about whether finding books, reading books, how, help us and being better prepared when it talks about building our library.
Well, now with all of the online tools that we have, you can build a library a lot quicker than
Yes.
uh, we what I was trying to do 20 years ago. Logos is a great biblical tool, and there are others,
Yes,
but
sir.
that gives you whatever. At the time, it was Logos and Word Search, but they just bought out Word Search. So I mean, you have a great opportunity to learn, and the good thing is you start learning what you like to read, authors that you like to read, people that for me, I am more interested now in people who help ignite my passion.
Okay.
Um, People who are great at turning a sentence or turning a phrase that get me. A good book for me should make me go put the book down and go do some more work. If I
Mm.
just pick up a book and it just kind of interests me, and to be honest, I'm using books just to steal. Now, this sounds wrong, but you understand it.
Yeah.
I like this book because you gave me a story. I like this book because you gave me illustration. This book is going to be great as an introduction. I'm going to walk this into an introduction. That's how I first started reading books. But now it's more than stealing an introduction or more than building an illustration. Now I'm looking at books who somehow kindle, ignite my passion to say, wow, I hadn't looked at that like this. And now I'm pulling out my Bible, I'm pulling out my stuff because you just started a passion that I can't consume unless I do more studying. Those are the kind of books that I tend to like now.
Yes, sir. Well, big bro, like I said, and last question: what advice would you, from your experience from 16 years old to where you are now, what advice would you give to young preachers and young pastors?
Stay faithful. Stay faithful.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely stay faithful. You're not going to always like the journey, but God is taking you on the path you need to get you to where you need to be. Um, Stay faithful. And if you stay faithful to God, God will always be faithful to you.
Yes, sir. Well, big bro, is there anything else on your heart before we get ready to close? Anything?
I am so proud of you. I said that before we went live. I am so absolutely proud of you. I am so proud of your ministry. I am proud of your marriage and the things that you are doing. I am so absolutely proud of you, praying for you, want the best for you. If there's one thing I could tell you, man, embrace mistakes.
Yes, sir.
The mistakes are the best thing in the world. Do not let Satan beat you up over the mistakes that you make as preacher, as pastor, because those are going to be the fuel that drive you from now on. If you learn to embrace them and let God use you through them, it's the best thing you can do. So I want you to know that you represent that generation that for me, Ricky Turner and that group. So here's Turner, here's Mitchell, here's Gaddis. Then here came me and Roan and Derek and all of them. Now I look at you and your group kind of represents that group behind us. And Doc, I think y'all are 10 times better than any of us. I think God gonna do great things through y'all. I can't wait to just see. I'm gonna steal half the stuff you do. I give credit the first time. You know, that's all school taught me. Citing the source means just tell who got it. I'm gonna say, I heard Brown say. That's what I'm gonna say. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you.
Big bro, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I thank you, like I said, for just your advice and befriending. Like I said, I'm grateful I can just come to you when I need advice, and advice you give me even during church services, which I'm not going to share, but you give me good advice even during there. But I thank you so much. Thank you for spending this moment with us, and let people know about your church as well. Where you're located and stuff. If they're ever in South Bend, let them know about your church.
We're 1862 North Olive Street, South Bend, Indiana. We are online, Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church. You'll see us at Macedonia Media, Macedonia Multimedia on YouTube, on Facebook, and the Lord has blessed us. But if you ever in South Bend, look, this is what you got to do. Go to the 8 o'clock service over at Greater St. John. That's Pastor Andre A. McGee. Come find the 10 o'clock service at Macedonia. That's 1862. Go run over to the 11 o'clock service at Bethlehem, because what we do in South Bend is we have church here. I can tell you that. And I haven't even began to tell you all the other good pastors that God has blessed this area with. He really has blessed the Missionary area with some pastors that are life changing, and I'm grateful to be part of their bigger group that teach me all the time.
And thank God for Pastor McGee, who's another great guy, great
Good
preacher.
man, good man. McGee has been he is the best friend you can have when you are going through the worst in your life.
Yes, sir. Well, that's a wrap for today. We thank you. I'm gonna ask you, bro, just stay on for a quick second after we end this broadcast. But please like, share, and comment on this broadcast. Once again, we thank God for Pastor Ray Owens. If you're ever in South Bend, as he said, you can visit him in Macedonia. But please also, as he said, go visit Pastor McKee at Greater St. John, and then go hit Pastor Witherspoon at Bethlehem, the trifecta. You will be richly blessed. So God bless you and God keep you.
God bless you.